Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and welcome to my tutorial uh, for a tutorial. So this is a meta tutorial. Uh, Typically, the first assignment in my web frameworks course is to begin building the Django Girls project. And so I point you to a very popular tutorial on the Django Girls website. So you typically get there, for instance, in the current semester, it's now the fall of 2019, and I'm teaching the frameworks course at the iSchool at Illinois. And we're doing this assignment in week 2. So I'm going to click on week 2. I have the schedule, the weekly schedule open in the Edge browser. And if we go down to the bottom, we'll see we're working on this Django Girls tutorial. And sometimes what I've just done is turn people loose on the instructions for it. I send them to this Django Girls tutorial page. And let's go look at that. And the instructions are available in a number of languages, and that turns out to be helpful for some of my international students. One thing to check, though, is it's not always the case that the the various other languages have been updated to exactly the place that the English version has. So if you're an international student and thinking you want to look at the international version, compare the first a page or so with the English version and make sure that you're not off on some kind of older version. Okay? So I'm going to choose English because I am pretty challenged in the language department. I know English, that's my first language, and I speak and read a very bad version of French. And apart from that, I don't have any other foreign language skills. And so um, I'm stuck reading the English. Okay, let's make the browser page a little bigger. Here we go. Since I'm in the Windows environment, it looks like it's Control plus. Okay, so I've got that. So one of the things I wanted to show you about this tutorial is uh, okay, let's talk about the tutorial in kind of general terms. Uh, these are the instructions for building a blog site using Django. Okay. And typically what we do in the first week, we do this Django Girls tutorial. In the real world, this is done by people who are just interested in Django. And the Django Girls organization runs one-day workshops all over the world where they teach, they have women who come and want to become familiar with this kind of computing. They come to the workshop and they work with coaches, and they work their way as far through the tutorial as they can in the day. And so people who have got some computing background or a special skill or ability, they get all the way through. People who are newer to computing might just only get started in that time. People who have the background from for the prerequisites for my course I'm going to expect them to get all the way through. Okay. Um, so because this tutorial is used for a wide range of audience, okay, uh, it, it has an introduction, which we're looking at right now. Uh, they have information on installation. Okay, so let me see if I can get installation to come up. For some reason, that's not wanting to come up. So let me see what's going to happen. Uh, installation. Oh, so I think we are on installation now. Yeah, we're on installation now. So this is how to install all the parts that you're going to use. Okay. Now, at the Django Girls workshops, they don't assume that people are going to have any special products like the ones we use in my course. Okay, so they don't teach people to use Anaconda. They don't teach people to use PyCharm. Okay, so they have you installing um, a tool set that is free, okay, and available to everybody. All right, and maybe one that you would like to become acquainted with. All right, before you get some practice in using uh, the more convenient tools that we're going to use in my course. Okay, so you're free to follow the tutorial from beginning to end and get as much from it as you want. And you're also free to use the tool set that they have you install. Or at this point in my course, we've already installed Anaconda. We've already installed PyCharm. We've already configured a Django project on PyCharm. What I do, which is easier for me, is I build the project in PyCharm. Okay, and I use the same version of Django that we're going to use for the rest of the course. All right, so it's up to you. Okay, I think the way that I personally do it using the tools from my course is easier. So that's what I would recommend. So you come along. So they have all this installation stuff. They talk about how the internet works. Okay, if you don't have a lot of background in mm, sort of internet architecture, that kind of stuff, it's worth a read. Okay, um, since they are not going to have you use a tool like PyCharm, they have you working at the command line. Okay, so there's some information on how to work at the command line in various operating systems. Uh, they have you install Python. Okay, they do have you use a virtual environment, but they have you use one called Virtual Env. Okay, that's not the one that we use in my course. The one that we use in my course is the Anaconda virtual environment infrastructure. Okay. They tell you that you're going to need a code editor because you're not going to be able to use the code editor from PyCharm. And they show you what a couple of different alternatives are. Okay. They have an introduction to Python. If you don't know Python, again, if you've taken my course, you should have already had, uh, you should already know your Python. Uh, Now they go into stuff about Django. What is Django? Not a bad introduction. Okay, so worth a read. Okay, Django installation. All right, so they're installing Django at the command line with this virtual environment called Virtual Env. Okay. Um, Again, if you follow my recommendation, you won't be doing exactly that. how to create your first Django project. This is an instruction on what to do at the command line to use the command line tools to generate your project. Okay, we're not going to do that if you follow the way that we do it in my course, because we're going to do it within PyCharm. Okay, all right. So what do they have? Well, they've got um, and they also use some conventions for the names of things that are a little different. Okay, so for instance, they call the directory that they're using, they call it Django Girls. Okay, and then they have a directory inside that holds the metadata for the entire project, and they decide that this one's going to be called My Site. Okay, whereas what happens in um, PyCharm is basically when you create a project, you call it Django Girls. This internal directory that holds these controlling files with the settings and the URLs and all that kind of stuff. They typically would, there would be a sub directory that would also be called Django Girls. Okay. Well, we can make it work either way. All right. What I typically do is again, I create a Django Girls project, and then this internal directory is not called My Site, it's called Django Girls again. Uh, and of course, since I create the project with uh, PyCharm, it's properly configured it. Okay. So where do we get? They have you change some settings. Okay. That's probably where for me, I'm going to create a project, and you'll see me do it. And this is where I will join their work. So it's all the way down in uh, your first Django project, and it's changing settings. Okay. And of course, the settings that I have are not going to be in a directory called My Site, because I'm going to take the default, and my internal directory is going to be called Django Girls. Okay. All right. Enough talking. Let's see me do that. Okay. So we said that we were going to call it Django Girls. It looks like it's all one word, all lowercase. So let's get this done. Let's go into PyCharm, fire it up. And it's a little slow firing up, but it'll come. There it is. Okay. It's a little slow on my machine because it's a virtual machine, and I've got a lot of things up. I've got the virtual machine up. I'm recording this with Camtasia. A lot of things going on. Okay. Depending on the speed of your machine, it might come up faster or slower. Okay, so here it is. So we want to create a new Django project called Django Girls. Let's do it. Okay, this is how you do it my way. So we're going to click on, in this dialog, we're going to click on Create New Project. Okay, it's a Django project. That's the second option. Okay. Again, you have to remember that the project name is at the very end of this text box, and I'm going to put it where all the other projects are going. And I'm going to call it Django Girls, Django Girls, all one word. Okay. And we're going to use the tools that we set up in Anaconda. We're going to use a configuration this E4 Trainer Django course. And that looks like it's properly set up already. Okay. So existing interpreter, E4 Trainer Django course, that looks perfect. Okay. So I'm going to shrink that set of settings down. More settings. Template language, we use the Django template language. Are we going to want an application name? Well, they haven't told us to start the first application, so we're not going to put anything in there. And we're going to say we're going to leave the box checked for enable Django admin. And this should get us what we need. So I'm going to go down and click the create button. And creating a Django project takes a lot of configuration files. And I still haven't turned off the tips that come up every time you start up. So I'm going to uncheck this, show these tips on startup, and I'm going to close that because I find that a little distracting. I'm going to maximize this so it takes up my whole window, makes it a little bit easier to see. All right. And let's see what we can do. Okay, so let's look at over here in the kind of navigation panel. We're looking at the project. Let's see what files are under this Django Girls project directory. And as you can see, what PyCharm has done is the internal directory that's going to hold some of the key files that really hold settings, URLs, so that does some of the URL mapping at the top level for the project. Whiskey.py, that's a file that we're going to use when we deploy into production. All of these things in the Django Girls website, they have you putting these under my site, okay? And I wouldn't fight with calling it Django Girls. Just remember when you're reading your way through the instructions, when they say to put something into my site settings, that you in PyCharm are going to be putting it into Django Girls settings.py. Okay? Hope that looks okay for you. I want to show you another thing, and I know how to do it on the Mac version, so I'm going to just pause it here and confirm how to do it on the Windows version before I demonstrate it. I'll be right back. Okay, found it. All right. It's telling me about Windows Defender getting in our way here, and I'm just going to tell it to reconfigure it so that it doesn't bother us. Okay, so one of the problems I have when I'm teaching is that the type in the editor panel is usually not the size I'd like it to be. I'd like this type to be a little bit bigger. So what are we looking at here? Well, we've got two files, settings.py and urls.py. And these are two of the configuration-oriented files for the project. These are two that are under in this PyCharm version to have. It's under this subdirectory that we call Django Girls, and in the written Django Girls tutorial, they're calling my site. Okay, so how can I make this? How can I make this type bigger? Well, there's a couple of ways to do it, but the feature that I like is that there's a zoom feature that allows you to use the scroll. In Windows, it's Control plus uh, the the scroll wheel. In the Mac, it's Command plus scroll wheel, and you can scroll the text bigger or smaller. You make it just the size you'd like it to be. Okay. Unfortunately, it's not turned on by default. So, how do you fix that? Well, in the Windows version that we're in, you get to the preferences or the settings by clicking on File, and you go to Settings. Okay. Um, in the Mac version, I'm not going to go there yet. In the Mac version, you go up to the menu and you go to the name of the application, which is PyCharm. You click on that, and then there's a menu entry for preferences. Those two get you to the same place. So we're in Windows now, so we're going to do File, Settings. Okay, and typically when you do that, you come to this appearance and behavior. That's where you typically are first. What we want to do is we want to change the feature of the editor. So we're going to expand the category editor, and we're going to pick the general tab. Okay. And just here under mouse, right at the top, the second checkbox, change font size, zoom with Control plus mouse wheel. And of course, in the Mac version, it says Command. So I'm just going to check that now. I'm going to say OK. And now when I come back, if I hold the Control button down and I scroll, I can get the size of the type to be just what I want. Okay. Now, unfortunately for me, I wish it just the size that you set was not file specific. But if we go to this other file, settings.py, it hasn't been zoomed, so we have to control zoom it to get it just as we want. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, so I think we've got a pretty good project. Let's see if we can sync up with the instructions that come from the Django Girls organization. Okay, so we're in our first Django project. Again, our directory, our internal directory inside of Django Girls is also called Django Girls. That we're different that way. So they want us to change the settings, okay, in settings.py, and they want us to change the time zone. So let's go find the time zone in the settings file. All right, go back to PyCharm, go to settings, and I'm just going to do a Control F, and I'm going to say time zone, time zone. It found that. Good. And I'm going to hit escape to stop that. And time zone says UTC, and we definitely don't want UTC because we want UTC will put us in Greenwich, England. It's not where we want to be. And I'm in the Midwest of the U.S., so one that usually works is Chicago. Sorry, why don't we look those up? We just so this is oh, we could go to Wikipedia's list of time zones. That looks good. And so country code. So we go down to US, I guess. US. And what do we have? So we have uh, Central, Eastern. It's a little bit harder to read than I remember. Um, America, Indianapolis. That wouldn't work for me. That's in the Eastern time zone. Uh, California. Oh, I see. We have them by state. See if we can find Chicago. So I'm just going to hit a Control F, find Chicago. Ah, there it is. So mine, I'm going to do America / Chicago. Okay, and let's assume that that's going to work. So I'm going to close that. Take me back to the Django project where I was. Okay. Instead of Europe, Berlin, I'm going to put America / Chicago. Okay, so let's do that. Where are we? Right here. Time zone America / Chicago. Okay, so that's how I populate that one. And then let's go back to the Edge browser and see what else it wants us to change. Language, it wants to change this to DECH. We want I want wine to be ENUS, English US. So language code, let's look at what I'm getting right now. So again, let's look at language code. Language code, it's already ENUS, English US. That's good. Let's go back at some of the other settings. Static root. Okay, so static URL ought to be /static/. Okay, so let's go look at that. See if that's properly set. So static URL /static/. Already set the way we want it. Okay, that's good. But let's go make sure that the next one works. Static root. I don't think we have that one. Okay, so I think we're going to want to just copy this. Okay, so I'm going to do a Control C. Whoop, sorry. I hit the key combination for the Mac. Sorry about that. So let's do the Windows copy, and let's go back to this. I don't think we have a static root, but again, I'm going to do a Control F for find, and I'm going to do static root. No, I don't have it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put one blank line in between that and static URL and paste it. Okay, so now we've got that. That looks good. All right, and now let's also go back to the browser. Allowed hosts. Okay, so allowed hosts is something that you're going to want to configure. One part of this that they have you do that I say is really optional for us is to deploy this on Python anywhere. Okay, to do this assignment for me, you don't have to deploy it on Python anywhere. Okay, so this says my application can run on my machine. This is local host. This is the IP for local host, or we could deploy it to Python anywhere. Okay, that's not going to hurt us. Okay, and right now, so let's copy that, and let's go back to PyCharm, and let's say allowed host is up higher. I just happen to know that because I've been working with this a while. Allowed hosts. So right now it just says allowed hosts. It turns out that you don't have to populate allowed hosts as long as you're using the development server. But if you in fact are going to want to deploy this, you probably want to just take that code that we got and overlay it over to the allowed hosts line. And so I'm going to do that. Again, I hit the wrong keys. Sorry about that. Been too long on the Mac. There it is. Okay, so theoretically, we don't have to change this code to run under the development server, but we will. Okay, let's see if they have us changing anything else. Oh, they have us configuring the database setting. Okay, so this is in settings.py again. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just the code from here, and I'm going to copy it with Control C, and then I'm going to go back to settings.py and look for the database code. And it's pretty similar. It might be exactly the same, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to overlay it. So I'm going to highlight it and do Control V, and I think that was character for character the same, so that's good. We probably didn't have to do that. And let's see what else we have. So they have you doing a migrate on the database. We're not going to do that quite yet. And then they have you working at the command line and starting the web server. Okay, so this is about as far as, and when you start the web server, you should get this a panel that says, okay, this is I've started the development web server in a, I've started the development web server successfully. Okay, so let's see if we can do that with PyCharm. We've got our project open. Okay, let's go up to the menu and click on Tools, because we want to run the manage .py task. Now, one of the things you should be aware of is manage.py is it's a Python administration program that you can run at the command line. So when you look at the instructions from the Django girls folks, they have you running manage.py at the command line by typing in manage.py, and then it's followed by the command that you want to run. When you start up the manage.py text in PyCharm, when you start up that feature, it's a little more friendly, which is it runs manage.py over and over again. So it gives you the command line, and then you type in what you want to do. Okay, so the first thing we want to do with manage.py is to migrate the database. What does migrating the database do? Well, it takes the internal model of the database and it creates the commands to build that in the actual external relational database. And you might say, well, we haven't really created the internal model yet. And I would say, well, it would seem that you haven't, but there are some built-in parts of Django that have an internal database model, and we want them reflected in the database. So how can we do this? Well, we're just going to type in migrate, okay, and then enter, and then it stuck, so we say enter again. And it runs all the migrations. Probably if you read through that list of messages we got back, it's going to look just like it looked in the Django girls documentation. Okay, and now we're going to start the development server, and we do that with run server. as you can see, there's an auto completion. So what I can do is, instead of typing run server, I can come up and double click on run server. And because you can put other arguments after run server, we're not going to do that now, but now we're going to click on enter. And it's going to fire up the development server. It's on this IP address 127.0.0.1, and it's on port 8000. And then how do we bring our default browser up on that? Well, we click on that link, and here it is. And you probably remember that we got just about this far on with the installation when we configured PyCharm with Django project. We got just about this far, but we didn't get so far, for instance, to change the time zone code and a lot of other things. So we've done more configuration this time. Okay. So what you can do here now is you can work in your Django project with the tool set that I recommend for our class, and then you can go back to oh, I see the browser. I want to go back to the instructions. Okay, so you just keep on going. The next thing is Django models. Okay, and it turns out that Django models go into a certain file. They go into models.py, and you can keep on going down here. Okay, so let's see, Django models, Django admin. You can do deploy. You don't have to do deploy. Okay, you can skip that. What you're going to turn in for my course is you're going to zip up your Django project and submit it. Okay, and then I'm going to download what you zipped, and I'm going to run it on the development server. So do you have to deploy it to Python anywhere? No, we're not going to do that in my course until, about 10 weeks from now, 12 weeks from now. Okay. It teaches you how to do urls.py. It teaches you how to do a Django view, how to work with HTML, all these other things. Okay, right. So when you're done, when you get through this Django forms, okay, and you've got the thing working the way you want it to work, well, then you ought to be able to do the following thing to submit your work. Okay, let's go back to PyCharm, and let's say that we want to submit this. Oops, sorry. I'm going to take a pause while I get my virtual machine back up again. Be right back. Okay, I've undone the damage. Okay, so let's say you've got everything working. You've got your development server up. How do you bring your project down, and then how do you zip it up to submit it? Well, the way you're going to want to stop the development server, you do that by going over here and clicking on the red rectangle stop button. Okay, and you can tell it's been stopped because we get prompted again to put in another manage.py command, but that's fine. In fact, we can even close that window now. Okay, and we can close PyCharm. All right, and wants me to confirm exit. I usually check the box so I don't have to do that over and over again. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the directory for the project. okay, which I think was under my user ID. So we can find it. So let's go to this PC, local disk, users, Kevin Trainer, PyCharm projects. Okay, and we've got Django girls. And if we go down here, we can see it has the whole structure that we're expecting. But let's go to PyCharm projects. Okay, and then we've got Django girls. And let's see, I think I want to do control right click and send to compressed zipped folder. This is how you zip that directory. Okay. And there it is. There's a zipped version. So the one file that you submit for really any of the projects that we're doing for this course, you take your project file and you zip it, and then that's the file that you send. Okay, so that should take care of you. I'm sure you'll have a question or two, and if you do, contact me. I will help. And I would say that if you do it this way, which is the way that I do it, you'll probably get done faster. If you really want to know how to work without the PyCharm tool and without Anaconda and all that kind of stuff, if you really want to do it in its kind of raw form, you can certainly do that. I just want to mention, if you do that, you're going to be left with a directory like Django Girls. Make sure that you open it with PyCharm. Okay, so you would go to PyCharm. Let's find that. Because I'm going to test it with PyCharm. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure you've configured it for me to test it. And again, PyChart's taking its sweet time to start, but it will. There it is. Splash a screen for us. A watch pot never boils. Here we go. So it just went to the last project that was open, which doesn't give me a chance to show you what I wanted to show you. So I'm going to close this. Okay. And then it's going to PyCharm projects. Let's see. I hope it doesn't have to fire this up all over again. It started up a little faster this time. What I want is the dialog where we find the file. Well, that's not going to work. Okay. Well, how do we do this? Well, in Windows, we can go up and we can click on in the menu File, Open, and then find your way to the file, find your way to the directory. Now, I'm sorry, I think we want to open up project. So let's say we don't want a new project. No, I think that open will do fine. Okay, so mine's under users, my username, PyCharm projects. Where are PyCharm projects? They're down here somewhere. PyCharm projects, and then I've got Django Girls. I want to open that now. This could be, if you have created it without using PyCharm, you can still open it here. Say OK. I'm going to say I want this window because I don't have something I want in the current window. Okay, and that worked pretty well. Okay, but if you didn't create this with PyCharm, you need to configure two things. One is that you need to go to preferences, either preferences on the Mac or here it's settings, right? So you'll go to the settings and then you want to get out of this the settings for the editor, go to project Django Girls. You want to make sure that the project interpreter is our E4 Trainer Django course. Okay, and we learned how to do that when we installed and configured PyCharm. The other thing you want to make sure is properly configured. That's the one for project. Languages and frameworks. Okay, you want to make sure that under Django that it has this enable Django support checked. Okay, and that this is pointing to our project directory. Our project directory is called Django Girls, and that this is pointing to the settings in the sub directory. Now, if in fact you did this by hand and followed all the Django Girls instructions, probably your sub directory that holds your settings.py is called my site. Okay, and so you're gonna want to have my site settings.py. Don't think you have to change anything else, and then you can just say okay. At that point, okay, having taken a project that was not created with Django project that was not created with PyCharm, uh, you ought to have all the PyCharm metadata added, so you ought to be able to go up here to the menu and click on tools, and you ought to be able to say run manage.pytask. Okay, and then for instance you ought to be able to type in run server to run the development server, two 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 presses of the enter key, and there's your server, and then you ought to be able to click on the link and up comes your browser. Okay, and again, what do? Well, if you created this from scratch, the project ought to have the proper name. The high level directory is Django Girls, and you ought to just be able to zip it up and submit that. Okay, there you go. All right, that's everything you need, I think. So I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye bye.